Thanks for coming. I'm glad to see everybody here. We're glad to see everybody here for this, NYC DAM Meetup. Thanks to Henrik to put it together as usual. So, we're happy to have you. My name is Matthew from Industrial Color. This is where you are today. Industrial Color is about, creative production, so that includes globaledit. You'll hear a little bit about this tonight, and that includes a lot of, retouching, production, post-production, capture. So, some of you might be, in that world. Some of you might just want some information, so don't hesitate to reach out to your team. And, welcome here. Enjoy the time, enjoy the meetup, and, Henrik is going to take it from here. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. So I just want to do a quick introductions real quick so you know who's on the panel, in case you didn't see it on the invite. So my name is Henrik DeGeer. I'm with Mar Labs. I'm one of the co-organizers for NYC DAM Meetup. The NYC DAM Meetup is the world's largest DAM meetup in, well, the world. We have 640 members. And let me give it down the row so everyone can introduce themselves real quick. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Matt Glueckert, and I'm a product manager here at globaledit.
I'm Megan Ray, photo director at Food Network Cooking Channel with Scripps Networks.
And I'm Shane Vella from Toronto, Canada, and I'm here representing North Plains.
Great. So we're going to do a quick intro with Matthew as far as globaledit, so you are more familiar with that tool, and as one of the collaboration tools that we're going to be talking about. Thanks.
All right, thanks. So a few guys I recognize who've been on here. This is probably your 50th time seeing globaledit. And Megan at Food Network is a customer and is very familiar, and we'll probably get into that a little bit more. But globaledit at its core is a creative production accelerator. And what it does, really better than any other tool, is it helps you take 50,000 assets, 50,000 images from a photo shoot, and get them up into a place where everybody can edit them and work on them together, or 50 videos and get them up into a place where we can view them, rate them, mark them up, or 5 PSDs. If we need to transfer big files, we need to go through and make markups and work together on them. And it does that in a place that's very collaborative, that's all online, all web-based. And we've been doing that for a long time. So Matthew mentioned that globaledit is part of Industrial Color, and we are a lot of different parts of creative production. So that spans everything from a photo studio to digital retouching, to digital production, to video post-production. And the software really grew out of all that. So we saw a huge need in how people were shooting, and they were gathering all these digital files, and probably something that everyone here in this room is working on is, how do we make sense of all this? And that's really where the software came from, was people were shooting, they wanted to keep it digital, they wanted to move things through the creative production process, and they needed the tools and the collaboration to go along with that. And so that's really where globaledit came from. So I'm going to attempt to do this with one hand, but I'll just give you a quick look at globaledit. All right. So globaledit is entirely web-based. We do have a server component that goes with it, but the majority of our customers are using it online and are using it to manage all of their photography and to manage their video assets as well as kind of all the adjunct pieces that go with that. So you'll notice one of the first things that people want to do once they get all their images up into globaledit is they just want to be able to look at them. And so one of the things that globaledit does incredibly well is it allows you to move through large collections very, very quickly. And so where we see a lot of our customers using is actually in the front end of the process, and that's where there's a higher volume really than anywhere else. And so the ability to move through your assets in a speed that's almost like a desktop. How are we looking up there? Yeah, that looks good. Okay. It allows you to actually go through and to rate, and so if you see, I can use my keyboard shortcuts here to break all this down, to move through assets. And it just kind of looks and feels and performs like a creative desktop application. So whether you're using Creative Suite or Capture One or any of the other tools that go with it, we try to focus on making it look and feel and perform like those tools. And so that when you get other people who are in the system, they can come up to speed very, very quickly. And that's something we'll probably talk about today, right, is getting people up to speed, the change management, getting people on board, and that's generally one of the biggest challenges. And so that's something we've always tried to address, is making it easy for people to get started using globaledit. So you see here, I've got this asset, and I want to come through and maybe make a comment or make a rating. And when it comes to collaboration, what we tried to do is make it so that the assets, all the information about those assets, the metadata, the audit trail, everything that goes with it kind of lives together. And that's something that I think all of us are very familiar with, is those processes become scattered at some point. And globaledit tries, at least at the front end, to keep a lot of that very close together. So we have a few different ways that people are using it. One is maybe to come in here and to organize files on the front end. So I've got an entire metadata panel here. We support the entire XMP lifecycle, of course. We've got the ability to come in and to make markup on all of my assets. So we've got this great zoom tool here. And I can just come in here and, let's say, grab this image. Oops. And I can use my pen just to come in and make markup right on these assets. And then as well, that all translates over onto our mobile devices. So I'm just going to go ahead and take control here with my iPad. This takes two hands, so I'm just going to leave that mic. The video feed. All right. So that's all right. I got it. We'll talk a little bit about how important mobile is, but this is something that we're really, really proud of, and that's our mobile app. And so once people get all of their assets onto the cloud, they go through, they can start rating, breaking them down, adding metadata, et cetera, et cetera. One of the great things is that you can access that on any device. So that same image that I was looking at on the web, I can go through and I can see, hey, Jody here has made comments on this asset, or Muffy here has made markup on this asset, and I can go through and I can see, oh, here's that markup that she's made, or I can go through and make markup on that asset as well. And so the process and the speed with which we can go through and rate and work on all these assets, and the speed with which we can do that is really, I think, what globaledit customers love more than anything else. I'm going to show you just a few more things here. Again, I kind of addressed the speed with which we can go ahead and move through collections. And again, this is something that's happening anywhere people are. So between the markup, the ratings, all the notes, the things that go with that, we can help people kind of move through that creative production process, whether you're in Megan's case and they're in media and entertainment, and a lot of their task is trying to break down a big shoot, to get things tagged, to get talent to approve it. So we've created interfaces and methods for people who just need to look at things and just need to approve them. So like in this case, your only job is to look at these assets and to come through and to mark them as approved. And that's it. And when you're done, you just hit submit and it goes away and it's off your plate. So I think part of the challenge, and something we'll probably get into as well, is making sure that the tools are appropriate for the people who are involved in the process. And so each part of globaledit is really about gearing it for those people. So in this case, the approval gallery is about taking something, putting it in front of someone so that they can just approve that. The metadata editor is something that is a little bit more advanced, but there's people who love that because it's so easy for them, and it's very powerful. So yeah, I think that's all we'll get into now.
Thanks, Matthew. So what we'd like to do now is hand the mic to Megan so she can explain the common processes at the food channel and how she uses collaboration tools, including globaledit, but of course other tools as well, to do this on a regular basis, on a daily basis with multiple photo shoots and things like that. Please.
Do you want to go, Hello. Definitely, as when questions at the end, if you guys think of anything, I was just explaining, please write them down and it will help. I can answer anything and guide us. But in general, Food Network Cooking Channel, we're the brand. We're not with the, we're associated with the magazine, but we are with Scripps Network. So we're one brand of a much larger company who has HGTV, DOII, GAC. And so for food and cooking, we have assets all over the place, and we are a brand who works with our new business, our marketing teams, our press teams, our agencies, internal creative teams, which is where our photo team is located. So we have numerous needs and assets all over the place. So with us, in order to meet everyone's goals and projects and their timelines, we really have to efficiently get photos in, processed, and out. And with that, we are a small team of 4. I think the best way of probably maybe starting to explain is we started with 2 people, 1 to 2 people, and not a photo team that was really developed and focusing on assets. So you're coming into a company who just celebrated its 20th birthday. So talk about 4 years ago, no one was really there. Every team internally was processing and just handling their own assets as need be. And that was really without any programs. So you're talking about our press team who's working on PCs, no Photoshop, no Bridge. They are just looking at JPEGs. At that time, JPEGs was the only files they're going to get, or negatives, which we still have boxes of negatives. And so every team had their own system of how they were seeing and delivering their assets. So 4 years ago when we came on, we realized, I came on to basically assist with some of the talent shoots. And it turned into looking to go, well, where is this? Where is that asset? Where do you find it? That we start realizing there's absolutely no organization, and everyone is just working on their own, which is incredible to see that. But in general, it could be very siloed. So at that time, everyone was kind of just doing what they needed to do to get the projects in and out. And we realized, the rate of return, how assets are needed, we wanted to distribute, get photos out to every team so they can use them and build new creative, exciting creative, and also not go to someone outside, not go to another agency, or not talk to a photographer directly and say, we need help, can you help and create something? We want it to be able to go, we can now source that. And it's coming also internally from a brand. So it has our brand perspective on it. We're going to help guide it, and we're going to also help educate people. So now we can get these assets, get them organized, and hopefully within a few years we'll have it turned around that people will almost forget what was happening before, which has successfully happened. It's only took 3.5 years really to solidly get there and feel good about it. But to start off, we were looking at contact sheets being printed out, grease pencils, the amount of paper we printed to then hand to another team to sit and then mark, highlight, give something back to us and go, these are the photos we need. Or, we need these photos to go here, and here's the selects, and you just hope that someone's going to say, do we save this? That's what I always said. Do we save these files, and do we have file cabinet space or not? So the progression from where we started to where we are is amazing. But looking at that, we definitely needed to find programs that would work for us. And our company in general, there is the amazing IT team who is an internal. They work with our Scripps that has developed many different programs to work for all our different teams. And all those programs somehow internally talk to one another, and they all have different end goals. We can go on there and find show information. We can see what deliverables have come in from a show and a different production company. But what we were missing, because there, again, was no established photo team and department to look at all of our assets and talk to every internal department and get them together, so we were missing a lot of workflow programs for our photography. So now we're looking at Food Network. You think of it maybe just as food. But we are way beyond that, and it's always fun for me to talk to people about that, because I'll have photographers come in and they open their portfolio and they show me, here's all the recipes that we can shoot in food photography, because that's what you do. And I go, actually, no, did you realize that we do all the talent portrait shoots? All the advertising you see in the magazines or on the billboards, we are shooting those, concepting them with a larger team. We're also spearheading that. Products. Restaurants that have been developed under our brand, we have some type of connection with the slew of all of our other teams, because we're a show entertainment network, but we are also a highly developed Food Network kitchen team. There's a staff, there's people who are building our brand and representing our brand. And then you have your talent, who's the other drive. So unlike some other networks, I feel like we are in this very unique kind of form where we're entertainment and food. And I also now kind of look back at our photography team, and that's almost how we're also broken up, is we're not just the one-stop shop photography. It's really hard, but we are the producers, we are the asset managers, we are the creative team as well. And so we try to do all of that and gauge it to every department, but at the end have it translate back to a few key core programs for us to use, because that at the end of the day will keep us going streamlined. We'll be able to get assets in and out really quickly. So I guess maybe what I should do is just explain how we start from maybe some photography and where it goes, and let that hopefully lead some of it. And if the two men on my side want to step in, you guys can. They won't. So in general, we have a team, a part of my team. We are hiring and producing, hiring photographers to produce photo shoots daily. So we have a few people who are meeting with photographers. We find out, are we going to be doing a recipe shoot today? And is it going to be for an ad, or is it going to be for our internal online team? Are we going to be working with one of our high-level talent who needs a lot of extra love and care? Are we going to be, at a restaurant today? So every day we kind of are flipping our switch on gauging where we're going to be. And that will tell us how large our set is going to be, how many images we're going to be dealing with, and how large of images we're going to be dealing with, as well as timelines. Every day, I think, every day that passes, our timelines constantly are changing from, we need it a week from now to we need it within an hour. So we're gauging a lot. From there, when photography is taken, we have a very specific spec guideline that we give all of our photographers, and that we have worked every year, every 6 months, I'm going to say, we are revising this to meet the current day needs for both what we can forecast that's coming up in the future, what our brand needs now, and also what we need just as a core to kind of get through. Because ideally, there's so much for the data asset management that we could really have our files incorporate, but at the end goal, we have to look at our time frame, our cost, and what we need at that moment. So again, it's about every 6 months we're changing this. So we're sending out spec sheets. Our spec sheets guide with our file naming. We tell them all the metadata that we want you to input, and now we require our photographers to literally be that person and input all of this metadata, which is not, it's common, but also not as common, because usually there's larger teams who, when it comes back to a network, they're facilitating that. But we put the ownership really on the photographers. And at the end of that shoot, those files are either coming to us directly from set, and that's usually if we're doing a really large ad shoot and a key art shoot, we are going to get those files within the end of the day from the digital tech that's on there. That person's usually asking me the questions while we're on set, and by the end of the day we have everything we need, and I walk away with a hard drive, or the next day we have a drive with all the backup of the files should something happen or one of us is traveling. In return, we usually, the other end is our photographers have a few days or so to process, and we're getting those files. Now the program we are using, we do use globaledit. It took me a few months to almost probably 6 months, a year to really engage with our teams. What kind of tool did we need to communicate with all of our teams? who is going to be using it, how are they going to be using it, and we chose globaledit to work for us, which so far has been great. I can't now even look back. I think I was telling Henrik before, it's like you forget what you started with until someone reminds you and you start going, I don't know how we did that, but we did that. And with the globaledit tool now is we started with it very minimal, how we were using and processing files, and now we just every month we're kind of changing something and engaging in it in a new way, learning how to work with it better to now keep up to date with our programs. So our photographers have gone from delivering our files via hard drive or an online platform through Dropbox or any other service to now uploading directly to globaledit, and we ask that RAWs and JPEGs are all uploaded. My goal for our team was to eliminate hard drives, eliminate anything that was paper intangible. If we had to be in the office to use it, to see it, to get our job done, there was a problem there. And so incorporating all of these tools meant seeing like, how is it working for us and is it gonna work for us in the best method? So now everything, I can be on the road, my team can be on the road, they can be home, they can be stuck in the snowstorm because they can't get to work, and we can access every single project and pretty much almost every document, give and take, hoping that our network, our own company network, is working sometimes. So photographers are delivering that way. We get it into the system. Now we look at globaledit as our one-stop system in terms of reviewing the files, we make our edits, we check the metadata really quickly. Now we don't have to go into Bridge to open it up like it used to before. We don't have to open Photoshop to check some details, which is fantastic. We still use those programs to support us in many, many ways. Check everything, and from there we are now kind of facilitating. We're creating light boxes, we're sharing with our teams. Does our digital team need to see this? Does our press team need to approve this? Get everyone's feedback as we're making edits. Go into talent approval phases. I mean, there's a whole nother slew level, which I could probably focus on one if you want me to focus on one. Maybe let's take talent, because we are currently dealing with a very high-end celebrity talent that's going to be on our cooking channel. And with him, we have all of these. We have production still deliverables, which means a company is taking photos on set, delivering photos through another system, which I'll tell you about. We have our commissions, our photography that we take from set. And when we do a big promo shoot or a key art shoot, we now have a photographer. I had a photographer on there taking portraits. I had a photographer taking behind the scenes shots and kind of promo production stills while they were filming the promo. And at the end, we had all of these images that this celebrity has very strict contract that they need to review all of the images. They have, 3 business days, 75%, and we had to go about it in a very specific way. So we have culled together all these images from all the sources. Everything is pretty much uploaded to globaledit now. We have successfully communicated with our PR team. They reviewed everything, they made edits that they needed to based on the talent's personality, and now we have just sent everything off. And it's a 2-step way. We can make contact sheets for our internal team to review when they need a hard copy, and we can do approval galleries. And with that, we can basically customize it as it's needed for our talent and for our press, who is speaking to our talent every day and their managers. We get them out, they are going to review it, and now within a few days we'll have it back and everything will be recorded in the system, so I can successfully look to my photo editor, my photo asset manager, and go, now finalize everything. Organize it into the right folder that you need to organize it to. Let's communicate to our internal departments. Here is the final set of images we have, and from that end we're now going to output it into our final kind of DAM process. So that's a little start of it. I did mention that there are a few other programs, so I'm sorry to digress a little bit, but we do work with one of the delivery systems. It's a program that our company has developed. It's Snip and Snidbit. Our production companies connect to a server to upload our photos that they are taking, and from that end, they roll into our DAM system, which we call it IDAM. It's an open text program that our company has been working with for years. And we can go in there and review images in the projects folder, download images, and in that case, for this current job, we went in there, downloaded the images, and then backed it up onto globaledit. So now we have everything living in one place for our photo team, and also because our internal brand is now familiar with the global edit. So if they see a lightbox, if they get invited to a job, they now only know photo equals this one program, whereas before it was massive amount of emails, it was different contact sheets and PDFs. You know, we were dropping files in different ways to them. So that's the nice part, is it's a safety zone. We had to build up a trust with that. On top of it, another work program that we use, because my brand creative team uses it with our promo, is we have to constantly send assets to them. And what's easy is, because they already have their videos or other projects on, is they use WireDrive. So WireDrive for them, they can drop things on. We are getting some of our images, dropping it into folders for them, and then you know, another process is made and images are moved on and so forth. So that's a few other programs I think that we work with. I'm trying to think of, there are other internal programs that they were just custom designed, but they all talk to one another. So I think for now, I'd probably not want to go too far on that one. Yeah, I don't know. Probably, what other directions should I get with this? Throw me some questions.
Sure, so can you do this globally?
Yes, yes, yes. So the goal that we wanted to take this all digital is for the fact that we can do this mobily. And that took some time to happen. That definitely wasn't going to happen within the first year or two. We constantly did have file cabinets with files that we had to go back to. We had a lot of emails. We had a lot of internal meetings. And everything, probably across the board within our entire company, you really have to be able to do your job a lot, as much as you can mobily. In our case, we have my team, everyone's mostly in the office, but we are definitely on the road quite a bit. And with that, we can't let any projects hang. So we do use, thanks for the globaledit mobile app. Love it. I can get jobs that come in that way and start editing. And I was just mentioning, like, I will be in a meeting or I will be sitting at an airport and I can start editing. My team can start editing. You know, not that you want to take work home with you, but to be very honest, if you're sitting on the subway and you have internet access, or if you're in the doctor's office waiting, I mean, and if you're not going to do something personal, or if it's during business hours, I mean, we are definitely all on it, still moving projects through. On top of that, you know, WireDrive, I can log in via, you know, an internet browser and get to files there and move things around. And even on my small iPhone, I mean, I have sat there many times on a train home, and I am, you know, getting files and moving a project to another editor so that they can continue going. And that makes a huge difference to keep people happy. All of our other programs we can definitely access, and I think without that, it would be a problem. Knowing that also all of our files are in one place, so because we have it delivered to globaledit and on the system, we have JPEGs, we have RAWs, we have TIFFs. So at any time, we can now force a file to someone else, send it, and it could be the highest res image. So if someone says, you know, I need this now, we don't have to go, we need to wait tomorrow until we get back to access that file. We can get it to you at that moment. And I think for our online teams, for our agencies that work with us, that is, by far, it's a huge time saver. Because nowadays, I mean, you have so many meetings that are happening. One director's in a meeting, another one's in another meeting. You have 10 minutes in between to maybe work on a project, and then you're into another meeting. So to have that moment to go, to log on, whether it's a website or an app, and move a project through is fantastic. And also to make any edits. Do we have to edit the metadata? Do we need to remind a photographer, this wasn't done right, we need you to re-deliver this, because that has happened. We can do that at any moment, at any given time, and that has really kept us apprised. We've been able to handle a lot more projects than I think we ever could have. And every day we go in, we get into work, and it's incredible. You make a list of everything you have to get done, and the fact that you maybe can get 2 things checked off because there's all these new projects that have just dropped on our plate from every different team. And every team has a different priority. So we have to remember, as the core photo team, you know, it's not us. We're not the center. It's everyone around us. We need to supply what they need on that demand. In a reasonable, obviously, sense. Not everything's going to be super quick, and when they need it, we do have to have some time to process. But to get it to them is great.
So a quick question on the business side. You mentioned that you can do things a lot faster. Can you give a sense of scale or the number of shoots or how much time you've saved from the manual process from the beginning that, say, 4 years ago to what you can do now, whether it's time saved or the number of shoots that you can do now versus in the past?
Yeah. So I would say probably in the past there is, maybe 1 to 3 shoots a week or every 2 to 3 weeks, because that was just before teams knew what our capabilities were and before we had a team of 4 that we could successfully support them across the board, from editing to data management to processing. It was only a few shoots we could really handle. Now I think on our dock we have at least this week, about 5 shoots happening. In total, a month, anywhere from 18 to 25 happening. And as I mentioned, I always think of it as a little dial. It's going to be a food recipe shoot one day. It's going to be a talent shoot the next day. It's going to be traveling and booking and traveling in different location shoots. So we definitely have done a huge step in increasing the volume. And with that increasing of the volume now increases the number of assets and the amount of assets we have. So the more that we increased, we needed definitely a little more of a foolproof system, which is another reason why about every 3 months we are redeveloping our systems and our tools and looking at how we're using them to go, are we meeting everyone's needs and are we getting these images out fast enough? So we've been able to handle quite a bit more and surprising our teams, which has been great to see that happening.
One question before we pass it off to Shane. Can you explain how many of those tools that you use are integrated processes versus manual, bring from one system out of that system X to system Y, versus automation through APIs or anything like that? And maybe Shane can explain how that happens with his tools as well.
So the fact that we have so many different programs that our company uses across the board, and then that our entire brand creative and photo team has pulled on, the one definitely drawback is we do not have a very clear, concise from point A to point B, and it's talking through all the systems. And that, I think, would be a very, very hard process and system to happen within our brand and company overall, because we are one brand under a large umbrella, we also have to constantly think of things enterprise-wise. So although I know that there's a different workflow that might work just for Food Network and Cooking Channel, and this is the best thing we could do, in the back of my mind, I will also remind myself, this is enterprise-wide. We always have to think about everyone else as well to make sure our systems are going to talk to our other networks and our parent network. So with that said, a lot of our programs are kind of like one-stop shop. Global Edit for us does a little more. We get the deliveries in, we can review, we can do markups, we communicate to our retouchers. But from the point getting it into it to then getting it out and into our DAM, that is more of a manual process. I mean, we definitely have to, we take the assets after we back them up to our own server, which we have a very organized way of doing it, and then we have to get into our OpenText DAM, the library, which then now gives access to all of the teams if we are not delivering directly to them because of their current need. All of our brands can access it, all of the networks can access it, and all the teams. So it's a little more manual, but in the ways we've kind of almost siloed them, so we have a very mathematical way of how it works, when it works, and when they talk to each other. And it seems to be the best way now. I would love to see it the other way.
Just to add to that, like she was mentioning, silos. We encounter this with a lot of corporations. There's always going to be silos. As much, and at North Plains, a lot of our software that we create is to bring those silos together. Sometimes we realize that silos are just meant to be, but that's why the applications we have full, rich APIs that you can make those silos talk to each other. So ultimately, corporations need to run with silos. If they want a silo really siloed off and do the manual labor. Obviously there's a lot of homegrown systems where that development cycle and making products talk with each other get harder, but definitely the need for silos in an organization, sometimes you just can't fight it. Some organizations can, some don't need the silo and can have a single source of truth in the organization where everything is housed. But we realize that there's still those pits, right? So, and more, I mean, visiting new customers that are taking on the production cycle internally, you know, as opposed to utilizing an outside resource, they're starting to hit those silos. So, you know, they're taking on more work. They're bringing it in-house. Now they've got a lot of data. What's their next challenge? We've got data everywhere. How do we centralize it? Then the next challenge, they're starting to create those silos. How do we bridge those silos? How do we collaborate? And that's why they start bringing in tool sets more and more. So sometimes it's an advantage to kind of, you know, speak to the customer when they're starting out and showing them a clear path to use different tool sets. You know, if they're very high, they have a lot of high-end retouching, bringing in globaledit into the scene. If there's huge document management throughout the enterprise, bringing in a specific product to meet that need, like a telescope, or if they're into design it, like from a production point of view. So, you know, I can understand where those silos are created and how they exist in the environment. So.
I'd say, though, that I think Megan has a nice approach in that you hear her keep saying that they revisit their processes, right? So every 3 months they come back and they look at it because there are realities, right? There are silos that exist. There's not one tool that fits all. There's not one process that fits all. And like, just like it took her a long time to get globaledit in, there's probably still things that, and she's a fairly mature customer. There's a lot of things that she could probably do or that she would like to do or she'd like to connect it to. And those are things that just take time. But I think you just have to kind of accept the realities that exist within your organization, and you try to bring the best tools, the best processes, and to, you know, bring those changes in. And so I think that's something that Shane has seen, that I've seen, and that Megan's seen. You have to be prepared to kind of work on that and to have that be an ongoing process. I think it's probably hard within an organization to, I mean, I previously came from Showtime and was part of a task force that like was bringing a lot of these tools in. And when you try to communicate that sometimes to people up above, they say, okay, well, how much is it going to cost and when is it going to be over? And they just kind of think that there's like, you know, we're going to throw this tool and this X amount of money at it, and then it's all, everything's going to be better, and we're going to be good forever, right? It's just going to scale, and that's just not really the case, right? Like, you're going to bring it in, and it's not going to work for this department, or this, you're not going to get buy-in from this person, or, you know, there's 50,000 tools that are scattered around. So I think the approach that you've taken, which is like to constantly revisit and constantly come back and say what's working and what's not, and how can we squeeze more juice out of what we already have, that's the right approach moving forward. And then you're able to build better tools, and hopefully you stay on the cutting edge.
So Megan, you touched on the people aspect that your team grew up to 4 people over the years. So that touches the people, the process you explained that is either was highly manual and highly siloed to much more facilitable and usable, using the best of breed tools that we talked about and that you elaborated on. Then you have the information. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how important metadata is when you're collaborating, and how you make photographers contribute consistent metadata, since that's kind of like herding cats?
Pay them. It is, yeah. It is a contractual requirement. I remember, it's like, you know, you can always go back to remembering, like, right, certain smells, certain moments. It's like, I remember where I was sitting when the first 6 months that I started, reading these emails, looking at my PC, which now we have a Mac and a huge screen. It's just like all the things that you look at of how you started, and you're like, gosh, how did that all happen and do it? And I remember being on a phone call with our Knoxville team, because we work with them hand in hand to make sure that, you know, they're listening to all of our brands. So we want to make sure we're kind of following suit. And we sat there going, okay, well, do you guys give your photographers file naming specs? And they said, well, no, not really. Like, we kind of have them do it this way. And we start analyze it. And then I'm looking at who needs it, and we're going, oh my God, nothing was given to them. I mean, that's why you just see all the generic file numbers and specs. And then you look on what team has now pulled an image, save the image to their desktop. I love to always know what they rename it. And then they come back to you 6 months down the road and go, can I have this again? Do you have the high res? And you're like, there's no information in the file. You have changed the file name, and you don't know also who's touched it, or was that also a screen grab? So it's like sitting there looking at these files and going, we need to do something. So the first step was determining who is using and how they were using them, and also what was it for. So if it was a show, now we know it's a name of a show. There's probably a season, there's probably episodes numbers, there are descriptions, and there's key talent behind it. So already I've now identified 5, 6 different things that I can plug in somehow. And so we started deciding, we need to create a format. And we developed, our first, if you look at our first round of like our file names and our metadata requirements to what it is now, it's definitely taken leaps and jumps. And as I've said, and as the guys have repeated, we are still revisiting this every few months. And our photographers who work for us, I really develop a relationship with all the photographers, and my team does. We look at them as like a brother, sister, as a friend, as a colleague, not just someone we hire, shoot out, an email to, can you do this, get back, and we never talk to you again. And developing this relationship, what has been great is, I've used it as like a little ping pong table. I bounce questions and ideas to them, they bounce them back, and we have this little dialogue. And I just sat down with a photographer earlier this week to talk about next steps of Twitter and next steps of video, and what are people asking you, and this is what has come up in our questions. And so I did the same thing with metadata and specs. And it's starting to talk, also bringing the word metadata to the company and to talk about to every department and team, like that scary word. People now, everyone is so aware of it, realizing how they can search. So it was kind of like twofold. Introduce some words to our colleagues that were not familiar with it. And then the second approach, really start making friends with these photographers that have been working with our brand for years. As I said, our press team was hiring a lot of still photographers to go on set. So we didn't have that relationship. They were just dropping files off on a CD, DVD, done. So talking with them, we decided, this is where we start. We need some base core metadata. Let's just have you start here to see where people would start complaining. And so we did this little push, like the first few months started, photographers were cool with it. And then I would go back to our Knoxville team, go back to our internal team, we would start reviewing, okay, that's not, now we need a step more because someone needs to search it, we need to get it into the system, and now the system, our DAM system has different little keywords we have to put in there and categories that now, well, if I can ask a photographer to do it and put all their information in, now that just saves so much more time and details on my team's end, because it will talk to one another. So we worked out what would import, what would talk to one another, and what wouldn't. And we started pushing it back on our photographers. And it took some massaging, I will say that. We had talked to photographers, go, this is what we're asking, this is why we're asking. We don't have a team. And a lot of photographers at first were just like, this is so much, Megan. This is so much. So then we were, okay, let's start looking at your fees. How are we paying photographers? Are we paying them for the extra work we're asking them to do because we can't do it? Because we are not going to get paid for it, and no one else is going to give us another body to do it. So we started asking our departments, remember that metadata we told you, and this is why it's so important, and see how fast you can find an image now. See now when that image gets shared, what information travels with it, and that when you send it back to us months later, we can go, oh yeah, it's from here. We now need to pay our photographers for this. And here's why. And our teams are pretty much like, if we can prove to them in a very black and white way of why and how, and that there is an end use, and it's going to actually help them. So it's helping us immensely, but as long as it helps them, it usually wins the battle. So we now pay photographers a processing fee, or it's worked into their original fee. They know this is the process. When they sign the contract, if they're new to us, we tell them, you're going to get this like 2 to 3 page spec sheet from us, and it's going to tell you all your logins. It's going to tell you what we want. It's going to tell you the exact file sizes, every specific spec, and we expect you to read it. And if you don't read it, or you tell us you read it, and you do it wrong, we actually are going to ask you to go back and redo it, especially if you're talking about hundreds of images. If you're 20, maybe we'll fix for you. And that, took a little while, but our photographers now appreciate it. And we'll still have them go, gosh, you guys really you're the company that asks for the most amount of work. And we smile and we go, we do. And we thank you for it. And we're going to keep hiring you for more jobs. We have a lot of different new photographers or recipe shoots that they would work one way, And because that's how they would work with their recipes, and that's the data they would input. And now that we kind of have started taking those images to process them into our programs so the rest of our company can use, which is really important as an enterprise, we've started realizing some of these photographers are missing key recipe information. So now we have to go back to them and we're reminding them, here's the document. We're talking with the teams to get that information out there. So our photographers have been pretty great, and we haven't heard anything bad so far. No one's, they keep working with us as we ask them to literally input more metadata. And I am concerned because, as I mentioned, Twitter, we're starting to dive into a new world, and where other people might be sending us images from production sets, which means from a phone, from whatever device they're working, we're going to have no metadata. We're not going to know who even shot it because it's going to go to a generic email, and now this is a new step. I mean, this just happened this week that we're just going, okay, a new phase, a new step. You know what? Guarantee our documents are going to change, our guidelines are going to change. We're going to be sitting down with our teams and our programming company and going, okay, remember how we told you about these images and what we need? Get ready. We have a whole nother request.
Sure. I think you could probably take a mold of Megan and put her in every organization, and you'd be very successful. And I think what's unique too is that because you're on the front end, you kind of have this foresight, but you're also like there with the photographers, and that's what's so helpful. But I think the lessons there are that, you know, for a lot of you in the room, you might be more focused on the library aspect or the DAM aspect, and Megan is kind of a lot more on that front end part, but you don't really know what you can get from people until you ask. And so, you know, like you did, you started with a few things that you needed from people. You got a little bit of pushback. You saw what were okay, I'm going to get 2 fields out of you. I'm going to get 3. Now I'm going to get 4. And then eventually you create this process that captures at least as much as you can. And then you build backup processes around that. But the more that you can capture at the front end, and the more that you can push onto other people, that's less chaos that you have to try to rein in after the fact, and that's you know, the benefit of all the processes down the line. And I think the other challenge is trying to, you know, translate what this work is going to mean for everybody else down the road. So when you're saying, you know, to the people who are managing the photographers, the people who are involved in these teams, why are we doing this? Well, the benefit is, you know, you can tell them the story. Like, a year from, what was the thing that you just needed last week? Well, how did you find it? How long did it take you to find that? Where did you end up finding it? Was it in a hard drive in somebody's drawer? You searched through the 50 different company databases that exist. You know, you sent out an email to all hands, at all 5,000 people at your company to try to find it. You searched Twitter or whatever it was. So when you kind of relate that to them and say, look, just asking them to put in this very specific thing would have cut that down, you know, to whatever amount that is. I think the more that you translate that to people and you can help them enforce these processes, the better it is for everyone.
So like, I obviously visit a lot of companies with very huge metadata schemas. You know, and one of the typical scenarios is let's push it to the vendor to populate. So I worked at McLaren McCann. I was 20 years of VP of Digital Services, so I ran production both on the print side and on the digital side. So one of our main accounts, for example, was General Motors. And there was always a concern about the cost of doing those auxiliary services. Hey, you're giving, you know, we spent so much on the retouching, we spent so much to get that picture produced. Why are we getting charged for metadata? So, you know, we had a whole group in the room, you know, and obviously all those little costs are a concern, and especially in the agency side of things. And, you know, I pulled out a Cadillac key. And I said, you see this key fob? It's General Motors. This key fob, you know, it costs $150 for a key. I said, why is that so, right? And the base, you know, they came back and said, do you know the research, the development? Do you know how much goes into the key fob? Then we told them, well, it's your asset. Do you know how much we're putting into to make that asset more viable in your network? It clicked, right? They understood that the research, development, the amount of time that a user puts to put in something is a justifiable cost. And sitting there and putting in a rich metadata schema to pass it on back to them it's finishing the job and completing it. So really, when we go in and we fine-tune systems or we recommend a schema, one of the main things is to recommend how to input that schema. Like, the worst thing you want to do is build a mountain and have it, populate this much of it, because it just doesn't work, right? And obviously, the approach of taking baby steps and building to that, getting that big mountain instead of building the whole mountain and trying to achieve it is right on. So.
I think, and there's another thing that you mentioned that is important, is that eventually I think that people are grateful that you're doing it for them, or that you've helped to teach them how to do this. So this is not, the challenge of findability and organization is not just unique to you. The photographers and everybody involved in the process has that same issue as well, right? They've switched to shooting digital and they shoot 50 times more than they ever shot, and they've got stacks of things, and they've got a Lightroom library that's 500,000 images, and if they go back and they probably can look and see like, oh wow, these things that I've shot recently are more organized. It's easier for me to find them. All these things are better, and they're probably grateful that they've helped to get better at it. And it's hard. I worked in Showtime Boxing, and I worked with some photographers who've been shooting for 25 years, and like they basically switched one day from dropping off rolls of film to dropping off cards, but they didn't learn any of the other things that happened along the way. And so you can do things to help them, right? Like you can enter the photographer's name into their camera. You can enter some of that metadata into the camera for them, so it actually, you've at least got 2 or 3 things that are there for you. You can make sure that you can run a quick batch on it before it goes out, because once it kind of leaves your hands, it's out into the wild, and that's that. So I think that there's a certain gratitude across the board for everyone. We all face this issue of how do we track everything, whether it's your iPhone and trying to keep track of all your photos that way, or you're a professional photographer and you're struggling to keep track of all of your own stuff. But yeah.
So let's take some audience questions if there are any.
2 questions actually.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we do.
Here, I'll stand. How about we just do this? Hey, I'm Adam. Everyone's laughing because I'm always the one that walks up the middle with the head of shame. 2 questions, actually. And I'll take the easy one first. Tracking and usage. You talk very much, what I'm hearing here on the table is very much a non-symmetrical workflow. You talk about APIs, you talk about sending things out to people, giving them to other groups, giving them to production. That's all unidirectional. What's the bidirectional flow? What's the information coming back to you? This was used, this was tagged. How, I mean, do you guys, are there systems out there that track usage, self-reported, back through the APIs, those types of things? Second one, metadata is a great word. It's thrown around though today. So one of my questions really is the implementation of the metadata schemas. You talk about, standardized IPTC, EXIF, all these other things. What do you guys do? What are you finding? I mean, you really don't want to modify the original data on the imagery, but yet for an organization like you have, where you have all these different silos, everyone's going to have different metadata schemas. How are you finding, or how are you solving the problem of different metadata information required by different client without changing the, I'll call it the core EXIF and IPTC stuff, without really going into crazy stuff? I'll sit down. Thanks.
Who wants to take that first?
Well, as far as your first question in regards to the feedback, I'm noticing, and I know, for example, in some of our product suites, for example, one of our products on brand, the new release is we're starting to get those analytics back to the user. So many of you might not be familiar with on brand. It's a brand system as far as delivering final assets to the consumers or to the networks. So one of the things that we've added, for example, in the new release is getting those analytics back, how it's being used in Twitter, how is it being used on the social side of things. I think what's happening is more organizations are requiring these analytics. So from a development standpoint, it's on the roadmap as far as getting those analytics, especially on the way it's being used, and especially in the social side of things. So I think it's going to happen. It's just going to take some, ramp up in development and some road mapping, and I can almost tell you that everybody's working on it behind the scenes, and it's.
I'm actually asking a lot more not about social media because, quite honestly, and I'll be sarcastic, I could really care less.
Uh-huh.
What I'm really more interested in is the production and the collaboration and the workflows behind after you do the photo shoot and you distribute it out to the production teams, the promo teams, the
Yep.
shows. You know, how do you get that feedback back other than you get an email one day and says, can you give me the, you know, high res for this image we shot 6 months ago? I mean, why not, you talk about tying systems together, you're sending stuff out, why are you not getting information back to say, oh great, you gave me these 10 images, these were the 3 that maybe didn't show. That type of information, that type of collaboration. You know, social media, a whole other follow-up.
Well, some of the approaches is that I know that we're currently developing right now is a lot of organizations, for example, will do a custom build as far as putting their whole production cycle on a system to get that feedback. So if they're delivering an asset from a system like globaledit to a vendor, the vendor is picking it up through the system and those analytics are there as far as, and I'm talking totally working in the web. That's really the only way you're going to capture that feedback unless there's a mechanism. A lot of people are using like local file systems, like a production system, like a Zynet system, and tying it in with API. So when they're extending it out to their partners and they're utilizing, you know, assets and deliverables on their end, those analytics are getting fed back. Obviously, it's a big marry between systems and you know, a big exchange with the end results. But I understand your need. I think it's slowly evolving there because it's just no one's really producing that end-to-end solution as of yet. I know that we're slowly trying to develop there and make that complete scenario to get those analytics back or get those production, you know, statistics back. But I think it's a matter of tying in these big systems. And I know we challenge that a lot. Everyone's asking us, you know, for example, we have 3 pieces of software, and how do you make it all talk together? How do you, you know, we start from work in progress to a deliverable. They want to know everything from start to finish. And our only solution right now is to build that custom solution on top of all our technologies. You know, and as far as the metadata is concerned, what I found a best practice that's happening is schemas are being introduced, not necessarily destroying the standard, you know, sets. I know that a lot of organizations will have a very extended set on top of that. And depending on the choice of software, having, you know, giving different areas in their organization access to those schemas to fill that out. That is one approach rather than, and like I said, this is not just coming from, you know, the retouching side of things. I'm talking about schemas that, you know, that don't even have to do on the retouching side. So in most cases, just organizations would create that huge schema, and I'm telling you, it's like months and months of sitting down with organizations to create this master set. It's a discovery that we have to do at North Plains that could take an enormous amount of time because it is huge and a lot of thought has to be put into it. But, you know, the IPTC is, you know, is there. Like, it's a small subset of what's happening in the organization. So that's how we're kind of handling it. So I'm not sure.
I would say for us, what we realize moving forward is that we need to do as much work as we can up front. We definitely do not have the time to now go back and remake changes once a file has been completed. So our process is, because we get everything done in the beginning, we have now tried to really almost think of a generic. You know, you get the core metadata that you need, but for everything else, if we know this one image is going to be used for this main project, but can also be used, you know, after, say, an embargo or a few months, we're allowed to release it to the rest of the company. We tag it with just something more generic that's going to work for the whole company. So that 20 years down the line, when we're doing now our 40th birthday and we have to pull it up, it's not only tagged that this was Alton Brown for, you know, zip block, it's now Alton Brown during, you know, a specific kind of project shoot that is more general to our brand. So we really try to keep our assets now, once they're in the system, they can populate again and they're not locked, which also controls the fact that once an image is out there on our library, or we send, those images can now be used in so many different instances. We do not have a way of tracking it, and that is something that we wish we can track it. All we can track is if someone pulls an image from our DAM, is we can track who has downloaded it and when, and how many times that image has been downloaded a month or a week, and that's at the most we can do. We did want to be able to monitor projects and how they were being used, but that goes to ownership now on that person downloading who has access. Are they going to realistically come back and notify us or in the system how it was used, when it was used, and why? Absolutely not. And we did this case study. It's like, we do want to know. I mean, and it's like, someone always says, it's like, gosh, Megan, you really want so much control over this stuff. And it's like, I do want to know. It's important for my team to know how something's being used, when it was being used, and also what sizes was it being used. So now we can also think about the future and make those changes. But then we had to give that up. We had to give that fight up in a way to go, well, no one's going to give that information back, because once it's used, they're on to the next project. So we're going to try to get all that information from the beginning and get it set up for people. Now, you made a great statement. You had a question. What happens if you send 10 images out and someone says, these are the 3 I want to use to promote this show? What are you going to do with the rest? What we do is we make selects for almost every brand, every team across our brand now. And we didn't do that before. A project would come in and it would be very project specific, and that would be the end of the story, and then we would have to revisit. Now we get a shoot in. Well, it could be for anything and anyone. So now that we're aware of every type of project, we do an edit, and we hope that someone can pick out of those 20, 50 images we have, and they do not come back from us, that we have to go back in. And if we do, we can, but not as often.
Yeah, if you have a way to make that work, I'd love to talk to you. I think we try to provide as much reporting and auditing as possible, to know who's downloaded what. But after that, like once things leave the system, it's very difficult for us to know what's going on. And like Megan says, it's very ephemeral. It's gone, and we're on to the next one, and that's it. And the volume is such that that's just kind of how it goes. As far as metadata goes, I take the stance across the board for all the parts of the program that we just want to get out of the way and let people focus on creative. So the more that we can do in the software to allow people just to do their job and to spend more time doing that, the better. So there's a method by which you can just send someone what we call an uplink, and I can preset metadata and I can force you to enter a little bit of metadata, and I can also read all the metadata that's on the file. And that's going to get me started with the most metadata possible in the way that has the least friction. I guess the other approach is to also create custom panels. So to blend metadata, so to take things from from schema A and schema B and schema C. And I always kind of recommend that if you have people who don't understand like what IPTC or any of these other things are, is to actually create a panel that's like unit publicist or like, art director, and to like put the 4 metadata fields that are actually relevant to them, pull them from whatever schemas they need to live on, whichever makes sense for all of your systems. You know that, but they don't, and they don't care. They just need to look at these 3 fields or whatever that is. So create a panel that makes sense for them and expose that to them and let them interact with that and let them search on that and let them enter the data there, because that's how you're going to get better accuracy. That's how you're actually going to get them to complete it. They're not going to remember to like bounce back and forth between 3 or 4 schemas. I just like to make a panel just for you, and you're done when all 3 are filled out.
So I've actually spoken to some people who actually have the same challenge, just like Adam was talking about. Sometimes they can't find the asset that I just pulled off their website, but I can find it on Google. So Google's tracking it, except they aren't. Right, so Google Analytics maybe, but there are some tools, such as we actually had another meetup on AdID that is being implemented and forced on many organizations starting April 1st of this year. I would like to refer you to our YouTube channel that actually has this video, and Harold Geller talking about it. And there are also other embedded codes that can track back the asset, even if it's being used in an ad, whether it's online or in print or wherever it happens to live. So there are some of those, and then of course there's globally unique IDs if they're retained in the metadata. So it's not necessarily about your file name and then adding an extra suffix and then changing the suffix over and over and over again, because then nobody knows what it actually is being called and which one is the right one at some point, because metadata schemas break at some point, and so do and realistically speaking, there is no metadata fairy yet. So that's sprinkling metadata on all your assets automagically. That doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist anytime this soon, a while for now. So is there other questions?
Follow up to that discussion. Don't you have any different rights issues on different files depending on the show or whatever? It doesn't seem like you have a system to
So the question is about rights issues.
In terms of for rights, pretty much if everything belongs to us. So if a photographer's shooting it, they're full buyout, so their images belong to us, so now we can do anything, and that's part of the contract up front, and they are very upfront with that. If it's a show that is delivering images to us, we own those images again, so now we have full control over them. If it's an acquisition show, there's usually some slight different usage and rights issues that we have to thus go to our legal team and work out what the rights are for us to work with those images. But it's definitely few and far in between. Pretty much everything within the past probably 7 years is under our belt, and that's the only way that we're going to move forward. People definitely, that was a hard part for some, mostly photographers, to get past. Is the rights, but also within our DAM program, the last DAM program, I basically call it our main library for everyone. We have the legal language written in there, so. And that travel with the imagery when someone downloads it. So now at least we know, as long as they're reading it, and that's the goal. I mean, we have to be adults. We hope that they're going to do it. They will see that language. But that is pretty much how our rights go.
As far as some systems, like I know that at North Plains, we have different ways of managing that. So we either can attach, contracts mentioned along with the asset, or actually from an asset delivery system, when a user actually downloads it or approves it, the rights are popped right up that they adhere to them. Really, that's as far as managing rights, storing all the information that goes along with the right. As far as trafficking it, other than them reading it, and once downloaded is really, it's all you can do at it gets really tough, other than, disciplining it with different schemas and whatnot in different groups. And like, one of the biggest challenges is just getting the rights into the system, because everybody has their own way of managing those rights, down to a big binder filled with contracts, to people relying on their vendors that they're purchasing it from for them to store all that. So really, it all depends on how you discipline it within the app. So.
Yeah, I think you have to assume that once people get their hands on things, that they're going to use them. Organizations are pretty content hungry, right? Every arm of the company needs content, from like an internal document to a social media campaign to the professional print campaign, whatever it is. Everybody needs content, and they want something unique. And there's so much that's being generated. Once people get their hands on it, it's generally out the door. I mean, we have mechanisms where maybe, Megan, for example, has everything in her jobs, and you need this content, and she's going to give it to you, but restrict you from downloading it. And you can write a message and say, hey, can I have access to this and this? And she'll pull those out and give you access to download just one. Or there's asset rights built into globaledit where you can go through and actually request images and type a quick message, and then me as the asset rights manager can grant you access to that asset. But we try to keep it relatively simple and straightforward, because otherwise I think it just gets very messy. And ultimately, if people can't get it from you, they will find a way to get it. Like they will come to your desk and pull the hard drive out when you're out at lunch, and it will somehow move its way down the line. But I think people are like, I need this content to get my job done, and I'm going to find a way to get it. So the best way that you can give it to them and to give them that information, the more successful you'll be, and at least you'll give them some content that they can use.
So, and also in digital asset management, most systems have a permission model where groups or roles, like the art director or the photographer, has certain rights to use or even download or preview certain files. So that's one way that digital asset management can help as well. So any other questions? Yes. We'll repeat it.
Yeah, I had one. Just because you mentioned you have a really nice front-end system that you put a lot of effort into getting accurate information that's going to travel downstream with it. But you also have a lot of other systems, further down the system. And I know in a lot of the systems that I've worked with, a lot of information is dependent on information further upstream. And
Sure. Megan touched on that earlier a little bit. The question was around standard operating procedures and accountability and governance, basically. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, no, that's what I was saying. She had a lot of things in place to say, if it's 20, we'll fix it. If it's more than that, we'll go back.
Right.
That's only right at the front end. If it's already gone through your accounting system or your other system, it's far too late to go back to the photographer.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Please.
I would say we don't hit that problem really anymore, which is probably lucky for me to say that. That has happened, and it really has been with older assets, things that were out of our control, or we only controlled at that part, A and B, but we didn't realize, C, D, all the way to X, Y, Z needed to happen, that we have to go back. I will say another thing is initially, once a job's done and when we get assets in from that point, we are checking immediately to make sure everything is met, and then we tweak slightly. So we don't actually have to worry about it anymore that something has been missing or now we need to go back, because what we had to implement the system from the start now. So it's really older assets that we hit, or assets that have been created, which still happens occasionally by another team or an outside agency, then that's just thrown on our laps. And at that point, we just have to go, where in line are we going to handle that project? It's already happened. People have already done it. It's missing everything, but now we'll get to it and we'll get it into the system, but we will not put it into our end goal system until it has everything it needs. Otherwise, we don't want to have to go back and go, that one little thing is missing. I mean, within, if we're still in the global edit stage and that happens, we can do a big batch processing that way. Now, if we're in our DAM, our photo library, it's a much more tedious way it has to happen, that you can adjust files. But it has been done. We've had to change, it's episode 101, not 100, and we've had to go make those corrections. But there's definitely very mechanical processes for it to happen.
Is that an approval queue? Is that an approval queue?
For that, you mean at the end, really?
Or at the beginning, like in global edit or otherwise?
I mean, it's really just more us taking care of. We don't have, yeah.
You're the gatekeepers.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why we don't have to hit a lot of other issues or problems, because the four of us, we make sure that anything photo related, our eyes are on before anyone else sees it. So unfortunately, we don't have too many art directors that are in it making changes and then dropping it off to us. We kind of try to take care of everything from the start, from the source, and execute it out, and then everyone has. And it's hard, but I think that we just try to keep on top of it.
Yeah, there's different ways that companies attack that. Either they hard force it, where if we don't have this criteria in the files when they're introduced into the system, it's just not coming in. So a lot of times we'll lock down a system because corporately they, if this metadata field aren't filled into the system, it just can't make it in. Or they go through an approval cycle. It's a lot of cases, where assets are being uploaded, metadata is being introduced. There is some force, assets, but ultimately it's going through a stage of a check before that asset is actually introduced to the DAM. So it's actually like a pre-check. Whether the system checks it automatically with functional rules or something that's automated, or it's very simple, a librarian, because there's just too much human intervention with these files and things just need to be checked. But that's pretty much the two approaches. Some companies just upload everything and will make it go through a process, and somebody will sit there and just check everything, or we'll make the system flag it where somebody would double back. It's really hard to battle that, because when you lock the system really tight in the beginning, then you don't have adoption of the system, and you've got people who don't want to use the system and they say this is not working for me. But then yet, if you open it right up and they love it, then they can easily not do this and not do that, right? So it's a balancing act. If you own everything and you don't have to worry about anything, sometimes it's the greatest thing, because just get it all to me and everybody loves it. When you're dealing with organizations that have got a recipe of a lot of things going on, it's finding that balancing act to make the system successful. So it's definitely challenging, but there's only a handful of things that you can really initiate, and it really all depends on what works right for each business group. Right?
Last question. Anyone? Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to Global Edit. Thank you to Matthew. Megan, and Sean. Thanks again. And check out our YouTube video when it comes up. Thank you so much.